think about your HR systems, who gets promoted, how do you make pay decisions, but also how do you budget, how do you allocate capital? Those are also important systems in a business that send lots of message culturally.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the HR Leaders Podcast. In today's episode, I'm joined by Maryjo Charbonnier, who's a Chief HR Officer at Kyndryl. During the episode, Maryjo says how Kyndryl is leading culture change in a 90,000 person startup. She also talks about how they've accelerated their transformation strategy to become an employer of choice. As always, before we jump into the video, make sure you hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and follow on your favorite podcast platform. With that being said, let's jump in. Maryjo, welcome to the show. How are you?
Great. Thanks. Glad to be here, Chris.
How are you? First of all, let's just start with how are things? How's life?
I'm fabulous. My youngest child turns 20 today. We're about to come up on the 2-year anniversary of Kyndryl being a public company. So it's a great time.
Wow, 2 years has gone that really fast.
Yeah,
Wow.
2 years, the beginning of November. We're counting down the days now.
On a personal note, both of our friends and your husband, Stefan, has retired from L'Oreal as CHRO. How's that now? What's he doing? Lazing around the house? No,
It's good to be my husband right now. It's good to be my husband.
Yeah, I'm only joking. How's he getting on? How's he getting on?
He's good. He's good. And I think enjoying also life after the CHRO office too.
Amazing. Probably be good to give the audience a bit of background about Kyndryl and sort of the spin-off and how that all happened and your role and why you kind of found this as an exciting opportunity.
Sure. So let me tell you a little bit about Kyndryl. We're one of the world's largest startups. We spun off from IBM just under 2 years ago with about 19 billion in revenue and 90,000 employees. So it's just a huge startup and change. And we really decided as we became a public company, we were going to put culture and people at the center of our journey and really focus on that. So you asked me what attracted me to Kyndryl, because I joined right before the spin to be the CHRO. And we'll probably talk a lot about this. I love, transformational assignments. So it was a spin. We have our challenges as a business. That's all a public record. And so the chance to do kind of a turnaround as well as really be the center of a sort of people-focused cultural journey was just, my type of transformational assignment. And that's what brought me to Kyndryl.
It doesn't get much bigger than that, does it?
No.
You're like, let me a 90,000 person startup. Let me jump in. Yeah. It's funny because what gives you energy and what excites you? Other CHROs I speak to, that's their idea of a nightmare. They're terrified.
I was like, oh my gosh, the holidays came early. Sign me up.
Yeah. When did you figure out in your career or what you were good at and the direction that you wanted to take?
Look, I love being in an HR. I always say, I describe my job as, there are 3 types of problems I solve in my job, right? Math problems, people problems, and word problems. The people problems are always the challenging, but I like solving puzzles. And so this job is continuously interesting and challenging as it sits at, I think, some of the most complicated challenges any organization faces. I think along the way, I started, my HR career really sort of fundamentally in an HR training program in an insurance company, and then came to PepsiCo, where I spent 13 years in HR in almost every division. And my first big assignment there was a plant that was a turnaround. Frito-Lay at the time had 40 manufacturing facilities. And this one was the bottom of the rack and stacks every week: cost, quality, service, safety. And I think that was where I got my first turnaround chops because we went from being the bottom of the pack when I left to being in the upper third of the plants. And a real lesson around what it takes to really change the business dynamics, change how people work together to produce a better outcome. Mm-hmm. And then from there, I became the head of change management at Frito-Lay.
Really? Okay.
And that was when we didn't really talk about change management. And from there, I went on to do Pepsi bought Quaker, and I was in charge of Canada, where we integrated Quaker, the business, into a lot of the rest of PepsiCo. So I would say the first three really, really big assignments were all about leading change in pressured situations that were time bound. And I don't know if I liked it. It probably is partly my personality, as I really love a good challenge. And then partly you get good at it. When I give people career advice, one of my sayings is seek the heat. Go to the places that are hot. It is often where executives focus on the problems of what's wrong in the business. They are full with complicated people, math, and word problems. And they often offer sort of like fabulous accelerated learning, but also fabulous accelerated visibility to get sponsorship in an HR career.
Interesting.
And so that's probably, where you asked me kind of where the roots of this are, and lessons from those days I still carry with me.
Would you say, like, across all of those different transformations, the challenges are similar and the principles that you've taken to each organization and each function?
The principles of change management don't really change from situation to situation. The situation itself is different, and the personalities and the business pressures as I've moved. At Kyndryl, this is my third CHRO assignment. I've been a public company CHRO now for 15 years in 3 different industries and on 2 continents. So there are differences as you cross industries and certain business challenges, but I think how to do change well doesn't change so much from culture to culture, business to business. And we can talk about some of the things that I've learned along the way that started in those early years that I've brought with me, sort of packed in my bags as I've traveled.
What I love to hear from you is we hear a lot about transformation and the culture change which comes with that. How do you describe culture change?
So we believe that culture is the messages we send, both that are spoken and unspoken, about the behavior that gets encouraged, tolerated, or discouraged. Right. So let me say that again. It's about the messages you send as a leadership team around behavior that is tolerated, discouraged, or encouraged. And that tends to manifest in 3 different ways. One, what you say about leadership versus how you act. So how much resonance is there between the spoken culture you want and the behavior you tolerate? 2, systems. Think about your HR systems. Who gets promoted? How do you make pay decisions? But also, how do you budget? How do you allocate capital? Those are also important systems in a culture that's sent in a business that send lots of message culturally. And then symbols. Who gets the corner office? Who gets invited to the executive event? What gets said when someone gets promoted? What are the meaningful moments around how an organization celebrates or doesn't celebrate progress, right? So it's about those behaviors and then how they manifest in systems, symbols, and what your stated set of behaviors are that you want to create. So when we formed Kyndryl and we were working on, hey, we really want to put culture, and yet we had this big HR change to do in addition to the cultural change. My vision for the HR team was, hey, we began to change everything in HR, let's have it be the proof point on the culture change, right? We want to do it in the way we change it as a proof point, and we want the ultimate change to be the proof point. So I'm always thinking through, how are we doing it? And then what are we doing as well?
I can tell that's not the first time you've said that.
No.
You've definitely done a lot of transformations. We know why. Most of the time I ask that question, people don't have an answer. A clearly defined answer, the way that you described it, very clear and I love that, by the way. And I love the fact that you mentioned the spoken and unspoken, which sometimes the unspoken moments speak louder than the spoken ones, if that makes sense.
Right. And I think it's really important. If you can't express the culture really clearly, it's hard to change to it, right? And I'll tell you our culture, I'll tell you it in 6 words. It happens to spell something, which is then easy to remember. So red, that's our color. That's why I have it on today for the show. Restless, empathetic, and devoted. Those aren't the words you hear every day in someone's, corporate values posters. So we're restless to learn, innovate, and grow. we are empathetic and to serve with trust and transparency in all we do, and devoted to shared success with our employees, our customers, our investors, and the communities in which we live and operate. And then how we organize our work and work together, flat, fast, and focused. And that's about empowering teams, simple processes, as we have the license now to reinvent ourselves in a post-spin world, and focused on customer services. We're the largest IT professional services firm in the world. We take what we do in the service to our customers very seriously because we run the hearts and lungs. They trust us with their most trusted IT infrastructure. And so, being focused on serving our customers has a big implication. When you say that on a value statement, you have to be willing to swallow it in HR. Right.
Yeah, definitely.
You have to be willing to say, well, look, then we have to have a focus because we want the internal service quality to be at or better than the external quality we're asking our employees to deliver to our customers.
Yeah, you got to practice what you preach.
Exactly.
Definitely. Walk us through the journey. 90,000 startup. I like the way you say that. It's just kind of just saying that. It's crazy to think about. Where did you start? Where do you even start on something like this? You come into the organization, kind of what's the first thing you're focusing on? Where do you start?
Well, look, personally, I always think the job starts before the job starts. Right?
Okay.
So even before I'm on payroll, I am saying, hey, if you can, I'll sign the NDA, send me the business plan, send me the engagement results, send me everything I can read, and I start talking to people. So I generally already hit the front doors,
Okay.
having collected a lot of information. But I think on that cultural journey, we actually started asking, our employees, hey, if you could decide how to shape the culture, what do you want to keep, toss, evolve? So we had a pretty researched benchmark perspective on that. And then that fed into working with our executive team about, okay, let's write those words down. The restless, empathetic, devoted, flat, fast, and focused didn't fall out of the sky, right?
Yep.
That was, a series of ongoing conversations right at the beginning, when we had a lot of other business and spin implications to take time with an executive team. So, we're going to talk about how we want to behave in this new place. We're going to talk about what we want the customer experience to be, and then how does that change what we want the employee experience to be. Then we kind of got a draft of those values and behaviors and principles, and we took it out to all 90,000 Kyndryls in what we called a cultural exchange, and we blogged with them over a 2-day period to let them have input, help shape it. Roughly figured out we were on the right path because we'd already shaped it based on their feedback.
Yeah.
And then from there, very early on, we got our top 800 leaders together, and I think what we did was make a real pivot from the past and say, okay, we're going to spend half the time talking about culture and half the time about what these behaviors mean.
Wow.
And what they mean about how we interact with each other and what they mean about how we interact with the customer. And then we've stayed on it. We gave leaders tools to take it to their team. We trained all managers. Within the first, I think, 9 months of spin, we trained almost 95% of all people managers in them, to the point that a year after our spin, when we asked the question, does your manager behave consistent with the Kyndryl way? We had 72% of employees participate in the survey and a 78% score on that. So we got all the way down from I'm aware and I know what they are to my manager behaves consistent with them in a fairly short order of time.
What was that kind of combination of online, mainly online, like online webinars, learnings, town halls?
Every possible way, we packed them in. And then as we began our HR transformational journey, as we changed each core HR process, we designed each core HR process with those behaviors in mind. And then the rollout itself reinforced that messaging and architecture.
So it all starts with the behaviors and principles, and you kind of work backwards from there and build. Interesting.
Thinking through, okay, those are the behaviors. How do I bring them about in every system and symbol change I make?
How was it managing that entire transformation? How did you manage the transformation while still delivering it on the day-to-day?
Look, I have found in my HR career that, you can organize HR any different number of ways. No matter how you organize your HR business partners, your countries, your shared services groups, your COEs, There's lots of different ways to do it. What really sits at the heart of the success is what's the governance model? What's the operating rhythm and routine you run HR with? And I don't always know we spend enough time talking about that in the HR function of like, how do you govern the HR function?
Can you give me an example of what that looks like?
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So, and how do you govern change in the organization? Because those two things have to come together. So first, you run a fairly rigorous project management office, and that everything you're doing has a review process to it so that you bring all the stakeholders to the table in the design. We run that process through scrums up to what we call a program design authority, which is a lot of our COE and senior leaders review what's coming in from all the teams, and then program board. And on program board, that's where we have finance, the CIO, organization, procurement, everyone who's got to be involved to help us drive a big change in the organization. And I sit on program board to see all the change that's coming through the system. What are the choices we're making, not making? And then the HRLT, right? That plays a really important role in that governance model. We meet every 2 weeks. And there we're both socializing the change that's coming through program board before we approve it and looking at how it's going afterwards. And then I meet with all of the country teams and our COE teams once a month so that they have a chance to have direct access to me to say, look, it's working as we designed, or it's not working. It's working in this geography. It's not working in that geography. So we're always having, again, back to that culture of empathy devoted to shared success and restlessness and flat, right?
Yeah.
We're actually using the HR governance model to, again, shape behavior in HR, but shape behavior out of HR so that we are in a continuous loop on always having a real shared understanding of how something is going on. And that's probably something, Chris, that, I learned along the way, back from the early days we were talking about is you need to really have that feedback loop about, is the change sticking? Is it working on the ground like you intended it? Because oftentimes we can get ourselves infatuated with our own PowerPoint and not understand what's really going on with
Yeah.
managers and employees.
But also, you've got the right people involved in the conversations often.
Exactly,
The
which creates buy-in,
Yeah.
enthusiasm, and clarity of purpose.
Something you said last time we spoke, and it stuck to me, and kind of relates to this, is how do you create a culture change that creates a strategic seat for HR?
Yeah.
You can't. A lot of what you just said does speak to that, but could you just elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah. Look, that's about, we talked about how do we govern change in HR. Let's talk about how do you manage change when you're moving out of HR. And you really want to anchor what you're doing in the business agenda, and then you want to anchor the sponsorship. Because I think no matter where I've gone in the world and where I've traveled on my HR journey, leaders want to hear about change first, managers second, and they all want to hear it before you roll it to employees. So you need to be fairly systematic about how you go about doing that. So change is kind of simple. We've gotten it down to a pretty simple recipe. First, I never take anything to our CEO and our group president that the HRLT hasn't had a chance to vet.
Interesting.
Right? That's what we're doing in HRLT is, I won't go unless you're behind me. That's what I'm saying to the HRLT, right? So by the time I take it in, I know kind of what the HR leadership team thinks to Martinelli. If they're supportive, we go to our top 40 leaders. We have that conversation there. Then we created something we call X Power. We talk to all of our executives once a month about the changes we're rolling out and what we've been doing. We then roll into something we call Empower, which is all 7,100 people managers we talk to in a month. And then we roll it out to what I call K-Power, which is all of our Kyndryls around the world. So we're pretty systematic. We can get through that process in about 6 weeks and get the feedback loop back up in 8. So that we have a pretty good sense of how things are working. Maybe not perfect. Some things we know more than others, but we're pretty consistent as an HR team. And that level of alignment, that consistency of message, that clarity of with every rollout, we also learn as an HR team. People ask us different levels of questions and we're like, oh, we got that one. Oh, we don't have that one. So the HR team gets smarter through the cycle about what the different stakeholders are going to ask us. and they have a chance, because often if you go factory direct out to employees and you haven't really spent time with executives or managers vetting that change, you end up with everybody's questions at the end.
I feel like a lot of what you're saying is based on previous mistakes.
Oh,
Yeah. That you made in the
yeah.
past. You're like, okay, we've got a process now. I feel like there's a
I
time.
got a process, right? That's one thing. If you do enough transformation, you tend to
Yeah.
get good at it as a skill set, and you learn from it. And I think the other thing we've been able to do is teach other shared services functions a good recipe for it,
Yeah.
right? So that success, because that helps an HR team when they're doing a big change. And we've had to change almost every single process as we've had to disconnect from our former parent. And so, it's been really, really fun to do everything all at once for the first time.
Yeah, that must be really exciting. Again, I love the fact that you've created very clearly defined recipes for everything we've been talking about for this conversation so far. But you spent the time to create a brand around
Mhm.
each thing, even each of those stages that you described. People, if you ask, I'm sure if I asked someone in your team, they would immediately be able to tell me the exact level that you're at right now and the brand
Yeah.
of it, right? As well, which is super important. And you're not missing anything on the way down
Right. Right.
either as well. You've led so many transformations now, and there's going to be leaders listening that are either in it right now or will be in it one day. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you made early on that you've learned from that you could share?
In my first CHRO assignment, when I left PepsiCo and I joined Broadridge, I don't think I knew the recipe as well as I knew it now to get it systematically through the system. And so we had done a big HR transformation, and at the end, and it happens a lot in HR transformations, which is, hey, well, you have managers saying, why did I just end up doing a bunch of HR's work?
Mm.
And I don't think I was as thoughtful as we needed to be about how to anchor what HR is doing first in the business agenda and create a lot of buy-in and executive sponsorship. I don't think I was in this job, we have a great comms team, and that tight partnership with comms and marketing that helps shape the messages around what you're doing and gives every leader a script so that you train them in the script of the why behind it that helps then amplify the message. I think I got better at that. We got better at that over time. It manifests in big and small things. Like, I don't let my employees say things like, well, we're going to implement employee shared services. Who likes to serve themselves? I always say, do you want to go to a cafeteria where you take your tray and you
That's a
serve
good point.
yourself? Or
Yeah,
do you want to
yeah,
go to a restaurant, right?
yeah.
So we talk about things like manager direct access versus manager self-service, because everybody likes to have direct access to the information. No one likes to serve themselves. So the words shape the culture, shape behavior. Those are some of the things that are important that I would say get the agenda anchored at the top of the house in the business agenda. Make sure and test you've got the real sponsorship and script ready to go. And then be really thoughtful about the word choices, the packaging, and create that continuous feedback loop. So when it's not resonating in the organization, or when you really haven't thought through how something is going to work for the business, you have a chance to fix it before it gets all the way done.
No, I love that, and I think an important thing I always see in the mistakes that are made is not creating that common language that people can have conversations, because as soon as you create the common language, people know what that means.
Right.
And you can then it sparks dialogue and conversation. But to your point, also not just common language, but but be super intentional about
Right.
about what words you use. And you gave a great example
Right.
of that as well. And we've seen that sort of intersection of HR, marketing, and comms get closer and closer and closer together, right? We saw it during the pandemic, right?
Mhm.
If there was ever a time where you needed to be a good communicator and a good at marketing, it was during
Right,
the
right.
lockdown.
When we talk about managing culture change, we use that same group. We call it the culture crew. And so the head of marketing, the head of comms, the head of our culture and transformational group, and I work really closely in our teams together to think about, hey, what is that change? How do we want to message it? How do we want to bring it to life through the organization? And all of us who play a key role in that orchestration amplification effort. are in lockstep along the way. And we meet with our CEO every month on that.
One of the things that I was thinking about is that it's quite rare that you also have the opportunity to build your tech stack from the ground upwards. Normally you come into an organization and it's just a tangled mess of systems in place. Now you had the opportunity to do that. What steps did you take? What approach did you take in terms of building the technology layers in the organization?
Yeah, I would say we inherited 100 and something 60 HR systems that all did some little piece part of the HR value chain. And we already had Workday, so it was our transactional system of record. So we said, hey, we're going to build off of it. And one of the things we were hearing in that cultural change was processes are too complicated. The organization is process focused, not outcome focused. People processes are really complicated. So, we went on a simplification journey. That's often, not always, enabled by collapsing systems and tools for employees and managers. And so first, you got to build a good roadmap in partnership with your IT partners to figure out, inventory what you have, figure out what is the right value path forward. In our case, if you've ever done a spin, as I like to say, you don't get to pack your suitcase, you only get to unpack your suitcase.
Oh, interesting. That's a good way of looking at it.
So,
Yeah.
so you get systems helpfully or unhelpfully all packed in your suitcase. It was a little like going on a vacation, to the beach, and you realize you have a bathing suit, but no flip-flops and 4 pairs of snow boots. You don't always get packed in the suitcase everything you need for the vacation you think you're going on.
Yeah.
So it's really important to inventory that process, and then use that same change management process we've been talking about to create buy-in in where you place your future bets, and then be very public about it. I was saying that HR transformations don't go on for forever, but they feel like they do while they do, because it can be very exhausting to the business. We will have changed almost every core HR process in a 9-month period. So it's a lot of change for the organization to absorb rapidly, and it's important to lay that out at the beginning, so that you can manage expectations during and afterwards. We've been very focused on, look, we're going to be minimally viable product. We're going to get all the other systems dispositioned, help reduce our cost base in HR. But that means a whole lot of change at once. It also creates freedom of independence from our past and allows for our new culture to be enabled and to flourish. But it will also mean an era of continuous improvement even after we're done.
Again, you knew that coming in, though, right? That's something you'd already been planning from day one. You already knew you had that suitcase. You just had to open it at some point and have a look in there and see what we're working with. So essentially, you're going to keep Workday as the sort of main base foundation and build.
One of the things that's really important in any HR transformation is making sure you have a really good, we call it the global skill and career framework. It's one of the most important kind of underpinnings. So it's not just the system, it's the data and the structures that go into communicating how you want. So, one of the things we heard from employees at Kyndryl is, hey, am I still going to be able to have a career here? What will be the career path? How do I grow and develop? We inherited, packed in the suitcase, 4 different global kind of career job architectures. So it was really hard for the HR team to do their work, because what any employee was coded as changed as you went from system to system.
Yeah.
So one of the early things we did was say, okay, we have to solve that if we're going to collapse everything. We couldn't use what was in Workday. It was also out of date from the market. Titles were out of date. So we mapped 90,000 jobs to a new career framework. The sort of pay ranges that went with that to bring them up to market, the titles, attached competencies and skills to the job. So now any employee can look, or manager can look into Workday and see updated jobs. Jobs have updated titles, but they also have the expected competencies and skills now tied with them. So imagine, and we did that a couple of months after our first birthday. The focus and structure it takes to do that well, and have that well received by the organization.
And that's something is super important in order to become a skills-based organization, but also empower your teams and your employees so they can take charge of their careers, right? And see where they're going.
Exactly. In our second big release, we really wanted to rethink how we talked about performance management, because that's obviously important when you're doing a business turnaround. Because let's just say
Yeah.
that while we've been doing all of this, we've also been helping support a business turnaround. So we called that performance management process your compass, and it's the compass to our shared success.
Mm.
Right? We all have to get someplace similar, but you may want to put different things in your backpack along the journey. And in your compass, you're going to want to share your map with us, what you're good at, where you want to go,
Love it.
as we all travel together. So you can see, even in that language, you hear the empathy, you hear the devotion to shared success.
Mm.
So not only were we changing the tech stack, not only were we simplifying the performance management process to focus on fewer things, the language we were using to describe it reinforces the culture that we wanted.
One of the things I was thinking about is throughout this whole conversation is it's a lot of demand for your team. It's a lot, right? How do you manage to keep the wind in the sails of your HR team, your own team, keep them motivated when they're juggling so much?
I tell them it doesn't last forever. That's an important thing to think about. And hey, look, we also talk about these are the fundamental skills that build an HR career now. You have to know how your technology runs in HR right now. You get a chance to be a part of a huge successful change. Those, then and of itself, are just really good skill building. Learning how to live in an integrated platform and understanding your data and the analytics you can get out of that are really important HR skills. And the other thing is we have open dialogue during this time. Partly I talked about in that governance framework, meeting with our field HR teams and country teams to hear what's working and what they're experiencing as pressure of things they can't get to during this time. So we're keeping the list of, okay, next up on our playlist is going to be these things, because we know we maybe haven't gotten to them as well as we all wanted to. So having an honest dialogue, and then really celebrating. I think we do a reasonably good job in our town halls and with our local teams of making sure people's effort and contributions get recognized and celebrated, and we really take time to what we call mark the moment when we get something big done.
That's important. I don't do a great job of that. Sometimes I feel like I'm running in a direction 100 miles an hour. I don't stop to appreciate how far we've come and celebrate those
Yeah.
moments. So it's important that we do that.
Yeah, we had to, when we talk about, in a spin, there's really interesting HR work. We had to change 63 country payrolls to be running our
That
own
sounds fun.
payroll
Yeah.
versus our former parent helpfully running them for us.
Wow.
But after we did each one, we took time as an HR team with the payroll, with the HR leadership team, with the payroll teams around the world, just a 15-minute call to mark the moment. I have a tradition I can show you. We ring the bell.
I
We
love
get
it.
something when we get something big done. So we try to really recognize, because
That's
these
amazing.
are they are a lot of wear and tear on an HR team. But I think HR teams, I joke sometimes that I went into HR for the food and the parties, which is truly a joke. But it is a part of that human element of what we do, and we have to take care of ourselves on that front.
But personally, what are some of the things that you do to recharge?
I think work-life balance is a one-size-fits-one solution. So my definition of balance won't be anyone else's.
Okay.
But some of the things I do is I'm pretty intentional, get a lot of work done during the week, so I leave myself some free time on the weekends. My husband and I, who Chris, we love to hike, we love to bike, so we're almost always outdoors doing something. And then the family time. We have 5 children, so there's always something going on, and it's great to spend time with the family.
I made a joke off air, but I'm going to ask you the question. How is it to be married to a CHRO?
Yes, right. So my husband is a now retired CHRO. Look, these can be really lonely jobs, horribly lonely jobs. So I would say, I'm married to the most wonderful man in the world who happens to be a CHRO and makes both the lifetime personal journey and the professional journey fun and not so lonely. We did have a couple of rules, which was no shop talk after 9 o'clock. Otherwise, the professional day never ends.
That's a good rule. Sounds like a good one. Yeah.
And then the other one was sometimes okay, if we're going to switch into professional mode, can you cue me? Because we'll be talking about the kids, and then somebody will ask a question about work, and it's kind of like, wait, what thing are we working on? So like I have a professional question is the cue of like, okay, we're going to switch gears. There were really funny moments, like when we were home together in the pandemic, we were working right next to each other in two different rooms in the house. And I would leave my office and pass his in the house. I'd be like, oh my God, I just had that meeting, like practically word for word. So, I think it's great to have a wonderful partner in life. And
Yeah.
it's been wonderful to have a great partner in life who understands what your not only personal journey, but your professional journey is like too.
Yeah, that's quite rare, isn't it? Really, it's something special for you that you have someone that's truly living and breathing what you do every day. I'm sure it could be equally stressful, but also having someone to talk to who really gets it must be amazing.
I don't think it's ever been, I mean, I think what's been stressful is having five kids and two busy jobs. I don't
Yeah,
think it mattered that we were
that's
CHROs.
true. Oh, that is a very. I can barely deal with one kid right now, so fair play to you. But I'm sure you've created a great support system around you, which is part of the success of that, right?
Absolutely. And, real clarity of what Stefan and I wanted, the culture of the family to be, the purpose to be. And we spent a lot of time on that early on as we created life together.
I'm not surprised that you have a process and some and principles.
Clarity, vision.
Yeah, and a vision. I'm sure. Yeah, no one's listening right now is surprised after the beginning of this conversation. Before we let you go, I do want to jump into some other quick fire round questions.
Yeah.
We've already spoken about hobbies and passions. We've already spoken about what it's like to be married to a CHRO. One thing I was going to ask, if you could click your fingers and change one thing about HR today, what would you change?
I think there's never been a more exciting time to be in HR. And so I would just encourage everyone. It can be very stressful and it can be very lonely and it can be very exhausting. So one, learn how to put your own oxygen mask on first.
Yeah.
And don't miss the opportunity to be part of probably the next 20 years in HR are going to be, just fabulously exciting. And so I would say, I wish I could click our fingers and we were already sort of in the future of, hey, is AI, how is, technology, how is analytics really going to change the people function? How do we know more about our truly most important asset in much more data-based ways than we do now. So I would say, I give everyone a seatbelt for strapping on for the journey.
If you don't like transformation, you shouldn't be in HR. We spoke about the kids and family. What legacy do you want to leave behind?
That's really an everyday dinner conversation. Every week, Sunday, we have Super Steak Sunday at our house. I don't eat steak, but the rest of the family does. It's been a tradition where it's the one meal of the week we all really try to gather for. As the kids were growing up and talking about what's really important to you. And I think we all have an obligation to leave the world a better place than we found it. One of the ways you do that is obviously raising great families, but another way you do that is being kind and passionate and in the workplace. And, we spend a lot of time there. So I think thinking about, with our kids, what is the thing in life that brings you joy and energy? And is it something you can motivate yourself to as you look behind each assignment that you have, saying, hey, it's better because I was there. I left something and I left a legacy behind.
No, I love that. And then last question I'll ask you. You've already given so much advice, but what advice would you give to those HR leaders tomorrow that will be sitting in your seat one day?
Again, seek the heat. I mean, really go where the problems are. Go where it's tough. To cultivate sponsorship, a lot of people ask for mentors. You can't ask for a sponsor. You probably, if I look back in my career, I've had wonderful people who sponsored me and fought for me to get that next assignment, who said, hey, she's really good at solving problems. We got an even bigger problem that needs to get solved. So cultivate sponsorship and build good networks. I was really fortunate enough to grow up in PepsiCo that was just chock full of great HR people. But if you're not in a big company that doesn't kind of come with a network built in, because a lot of the HR community is in smaller places, do try to set aside maybe twice a month a way to get out and meet other HR people and listen to your podcast.
Thank you.
Which is flexible on when people can do it. That's really important. It's more and more important as you come up the HR career path that you have sounding boards and you have a sense of what's going on in your own function that is helpful in shaping your thinking. So those would be my 3 pieces of advice.
Well, listen, I could talk to you forever.
Likewise.
But you've got a transformation to get on with. But listen,
Yeah.
I appreciate you taking the time out. Like, there is no show without people like you that take time to give back and share their journey. So I appreciate you. And
well, thanks for
all
all
the
you do for our community, Chris. I think you bring a lot to it. And hopefully, if in your next journey to New York, you and I and Stefan will have a chance to connect again.
100%. Wish you all the best until next week.
Okay, likewise. Okay, bye.